Hello, it's Richard Haggerty here. And one of the things that I get asked a lot about is I've had this so many times over the years, over the past 2.5 decades, where somebody phones up and says, oh, look, I've got a friend, a family member, husband, a wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, work colleague, neighbour. What can I do to help them to quit smoking? And usually the conversation that I have with them is, will boil down to this. What is that person's motivation? And I'm willing to have a conversation with them, but they'll need to call me. Now, it very rarely from that position of somebody phoning up me to ask for help for another person, does that resolve or does that result in anything truly different happening? Why? Because the person who they're concerned about is not at the point where they can stop smoking. Their motivation's not there. They have many fears, they have many concerns. Yes, if they were to call me, if we were to have a conversation, we'll be able to resolve a lot of that and we'll be able to get them to the point where they're able to change. Okay. But most people who are smokers are very wily. They've spent most of their years, their formative years, smoking. They love it. It feels like a friend. It's a way to escape. Yes, they want to quit on one level. Yes, they know they shouldn't be doing it. But of course, they've had society, their friends, their family, their girlfriend, their boyfriend, their partner, their husband, their wife, colleagues, neighbours telling them to quit. So they've become quite immune to it. And you have to understand that people smoke because of the deep psychological, emotional needs that they get. Okay. And if you think about the things in your life that you really enjoy, that are really meaningful for you, if somebody said, oh, just stop doing that, you can't have that anymore, that's silly. All right. You'd automatically and instinctively feel some resistance to that. We don't have to go and watch sports every week. We don't have to watch our favorite thing on TV. We don't have to eat our favorite foods. We don't have to spend time with our favorite people. But we like to. All right. And once somebody has that emotional connection to something, you have to tread very, very carefully. Now, this video series is going to look at how to have deeply engaging and reflective conversations with smokers and not antagonize them or cause defenses to come up. Let me repeat that. I'm going to show you how to have deeply engaging and reflective conversations with smokers and not antagonize them or cause defenses to come up. So this is going to be a really, really important thing because there's no one out there who teaches you how to have these kind of conversations with the people you care about with smoking. All right. And what you're going to find is there's going to be an emphasis here, which is the emphasis really when I train people, actually fellow therapists and coaches, and in this kind of area, is not to try and change people directly. All right. Have you ever had the experience of somebody who comes along and tries telling you that you should change something? You should become a vegetarian, you should become a vegan, you should start eating meat, you should start running more, you should start doing this, you should read this book, you should do that, you should make this change to your life, you should do all these things. And it's unsolicited, right? And even if it's for our greater good, we like to have a sense of agency. We enjoy having free will. We like to be able to make our own conscious choices about things. So if somebody is trying to force us or edge us or manipulate us, we can sense it. So why traditional sales doesn't work so well. It's why we're really immune to those kind of things where we say, oh, I had a friend who was like really overweight and sitting on the sofa, and they went out and they started running, and look at them now. Whilst they're looking at you sitting on the sofa with a goofy grin on their face, thinking they're very subtly suggesting to you that you too could do that, whilst they're irritating the heck out of you. All right, that's what we want to avoid. All right, we want to avoid antagonizing our loved ones, our friends, our colleagues who smoke, but we also want to help them. There is a way to do that. There's a way to do it very, very respectfully, okay, which is deeply, deeply empowering. Because let me tell you something, having worked with hundreds of smokers across many different countries in the world, I can tell you one thing. People will not change until they feel something inside them where they say, yeah, enough is enough, I want to do this now. All right. It's always got to be internally generated for it to be a long-term lasting solution. But what we can do is we can provide the supportive atmosphere, the supportive environment, a kind of reflective inner environment where these ideas can percolate and they can think about them. All right, so we're going to be going quite deeply to this. And in fact, by the way, the skills you're going to learn here are applicable really to any area of life. All right, and the key underlying premise is this: do not try to tell people what to do and change them. Resist the idea of judging, and you will empower them to have more choices to change. All right, because remember, this is about how to have deeply engaging and reflective conversations with smokers and not antagonize them or cause defenses to come up. So what are we going to be looking at in these? Well, we're going to be looking at in these videos. Okay, there are a few questions that we're going to look at. All right, and I want to give you an idea of some of the kinds of things that we're going to be looking at. We're going to look at the problem with helping someone and what we call secondary gain and personal responsibility. We're going to look at the problem with trying to help someone directly when you're trying to give them advice and make them change. We're going to look at the two moments of change that happen inside people, so you understand the journey that smokers have to go through, or indeed anyone has to go through to make a change. If you understand that, you'll understand the role, the foundational role that you can play in empowering people. And as long as you bear in mind this idea of not trying to change them and you allow enough time, you're going to be playing a significant part in their transformation. And it may well happen much quicker than you ever thought possible by you changing your approach and changing your outlook. All right. And remember, look, if you wait for the world to change before you're happy and content, good luck with that. Right. You're always going to be frustrated, but you can change yourself. All right. And when we we're more flexible in our communication with other people, we tend to get different results. Okay, we're going to look at how not to begin a conversation about quitting smoking. Then we'll look at how to begin a conversation about quitting smoking. We'll look at the 3 rules of conversations with smokers. We'll look at the first question to ask them and why you would. You'll learn how to sustain conversations with smokers about quitting smoking. You'll understand follow-up questions to help smokers get to the root of what's really happening. You, of course, we've had a first question, so you'll have the second question to ask smokers and why. The third question to ask smokers and why, and then the invitation question and why not to rush this. All right. We'll look at an analogy of wanted versus unwanted presents and gifts. You'll learn about the importance of giving enough time. You'll learn about the consistency of your response and your behavior. And you'll also know how you will, by the end of this, how you're on track with helping somebody and when you're not. And the beauty of this is you will be getting very, very clear feedback from people, from smokers, from colleagues, friends, family, other people who you meet, neighbours, that they are starting to think differently. And when you get to this point, all right, quick heads up, this is the point when you're most likely to blow it. All right. This is the point where it's tempting to say, jump up in the air and go, yeah, I knew I could beat you. I knew I could show you. I knew I could teach you because I've been manipulating you all along subtly. Ha, 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 ha. Now, you might not think you're doing that, okay? But that, I'll show you the subtle version of that people do, okay? That causes them to completely blow it and unwind all the way. So by the time we get to in this video, you're going to have a very, very robust way of helping people, not antagonize them, and help sustain that. And here's a hint, right? When somebody says, you know, you got me thinking differently, you know, all you need to do is stay cool and subtle and go, you know what? That's brilliant. Sounds like you're onto something here. You know, I think you could be onto something. And you keep it subtle and you keep not trying to change, right? Because remember, the moment that you start to try and change someone, defenses will come up. It's just natural. We have to have psychological defenses inside us to be able to survive in our modern society, because there are plenty of people out there who do not have our highest good in mind, and there are people who are, quite frankly, trying to sell us inferior ideas or ideas that are not right for us. So we need to be able to be discerning and be able to distinguish, okay? And it's good that your friends and your family and your co-workers have that. So the important thing here is to understand there's a set of skills here that it is possible to learn, that you can use to help somebody make any change. We'll be talking about, of course, smoking here, but this equally applies to weight loss. Any change somebody wants to make in their life, whether maybe they're single and they're thinking about getting out in the world again, all right? There'll be a similar kind of trajectory. Obviously, there'll be some differences as well in the way that we ask questions. But let's start with this. And any feedback that you have, any follow-up questions, do let me know. And you can do that. You can hit me up in the comments. You can ask me. Happy to do any follow-up on this. But you'll find if you go through all of this, that it's pretty comprehensive, and it should answer the bulk of the questions that people have. Why? Because I've been getting these questions and inquiries now for well over 2 decades. All right. And I know when somebody's ready to change. I know when they're not ready to change. And I know when, they turn up because their wife or their husband or their boyfriend or their girlfriend or their partner or their work colleague told them to. And that, let me tell you, is not the greatest place to be. You want to help people. If you want to help somebody change, you've got to empower them so they feel like they made the decision, they're motivated, they own it, and then they get to bask in the glory of having made a change. So what's the problem with helping somebody change? What's the problem in helping a smoker to become a non-smoker? What's the problem in being able to chat with somebody you care about, a friend, family member, a work colleague, a neighbour, about smoking? Well, most people just simply go out and end up antagonising their friends and their family with this. What do I mean by that? Well, they'll just simply say, oh, you should stop smoking. Oh, it's bad. Oh, here's a book I found. Oh, here's a course I found. Oh, I think, oh, I know this person who stopped smoking. It's really good. I think you could do it too. And they have simply no respect for the fact that person is in their life, where they're at, doing the things that they're doing, having smoking as their coping mechanism, their kind of reward, their treat for the day, which we all have, some variation of things that we do or things that we have to help us, feel well and manage our day-to-day life, our rewards. And they simply have no, shall we say, kindness, compassion, and tact in the way that they approach this. All right. And look, at least in the Western world, most people who are hugely obese would probably not choose to be that way. All right. But there are a number of reasons why they've gotten that way, through often a lot of emotional challenges, poor education, poor decisions, but also, that's a feeling that that's really all they can do. That that breaking out of that is just virtually impossible. And if it feels very, very hard, if your coping mechanism is to have some food and sit on the sofa, and you feel like it's very, very hard to break that, or impossible, and you feel like everyone's judging you, it's going to be very, very hard to change that. And it's exactly the same with smoking. Okay. And the problem with helping somebody to stop smoking is you're very likely to trigger their defense mechanisms if you go and try and jump straight in and make suggestions for them. Okay, if you try to basically take over their life, take over their agency, because you think you know better. Have you ever noticed, though, in the world, there are plenty of people who think they know better. All right, whether it's politicians or religious groups or other people in your community, or a boss, a line manager who is very haughty and stands over you. There are plenty of people who feel that they know better than you. All right. And honestly, how much do you enjoy when those people let you know that and give you unsolicited advice and tell you how you should be living your life differently? If you're like most people, that's not really something that you enjoy too much. And so the problem with helping somebody to quit smoking is that they have spent their lives managing and dealing with things in a certain way. Their own mental health, their own way of dealing with difficulties, their own way of dealing with challenges, their own way of coping day to day. If they get bored, if they get stressed, if they have social anxiety, this has been their way of dealing with things. It's also been their reward mechanism. And you'll often hear this from smokers, that it's been a faithful friend, a crutch to lean on, a consistent force in their life. All right. Let me ask you this. Anyone who's had a faithful friend through their life, who's like a rock, yeah, who's consistent, who's always there for you, an actual physical flesh and being friend, if that person was suddenly taken away, how would you be feeling? Well, I know how I'd be feeling from the people who I love and who are like that for me. I'd be feeling lost, all at sea, perplexed, sad, resentful, confused. All right. When smoking is that symbol for smokers, then you have to tread very, very carefully. All right. So this is what we call secondary gain. That the people who smokers smoke not because, as a general rule, that they like the taste of the smell and the burning of it on them. There are a few people who fall into that category, but by and large, it's not an aesthetically pleasing thing. It's not like the most delicious tasting food. In fact, taste buds tend to get blunted by it. But what it does do is it gives them a way of managing life, the highs and lows. Okay. And to change, a person needs to take personal responsibility. All right. When a person decides, this is what I want to do in my life, and they have their own personal reason, their own personal connection for it, well, then change can happen. But it won't happen if they're being badgered and told what to do. The way to do it, the subtle, respectful, kind way, compassionate way to do this is to be there for somebody, ask them questions in a very particular way, and really be there for them and listen to those responses without trying to change them. And we're going to look in a much deeper kind of level about this, the practicalities of this. So just remember that the problem with helping somebody is if you're trying to force them or tell them or advise them or counsel them, especially when they haven't asked, and even if they have asked, right? The only information you're going to be giving is to their conscious mind. You're going to be giving them facts and strategies that they already know about. And that's not going to help them deal with the unconscious transformative aspect that needs to happen. All right. So if you want to help somebody to change, paradoxically, you have to back off from trying to make them change and instead have a deep understanding and empathy for the journey that they've been on in their life. And be curious about how, help them rather be curious about what's really going on by you being the curious one who's respectful and modeling this mixture of curiosity and compassion for them. Because the problem with helping somebody to become a non-smoker is this is their way of coping. It's the way of dealing with life. It's the way of managing life. And their defenses will be triggered. You'll antagonize them, or they will just give you standard kind of flat, non-reflective answers. They'll simply bat away the tennis ball of an idea and suggestion that you've served to them. All right. Or they will literally whack it out the court because they're just not, it just doesn't hit home for them. All right. And if people feel that you are trying to change them or take away something that they use to cope, then that will hold them back. All right. So this is really, really important to understand, because you understand that smoking fulfills often hidden psychological needs, and that some of these people will be aware of, like managing boredom and anxiety, but there'll be other deeper kind of impulses inside they may not necessarily be aware of consciously, and that their unconscious mind has used smoking, associates smoking as a symbol for how to manage their life. Well, that's why we've got to tread carefully, okay? And that's really what we're going to be talking about now in deeper detail in all the follow-up videos, how to have these specific conversations, the questions to ask, and so forth. But before we do that, we're going to dive in to the 2 moments of change. So to help somebody to become a non-smoker, it's really helpful to understand that they have to go through a particular journey. It's kind of like a story arc that they'll go through. And the story arc is something like this. Things happened in their life. Smoking came into their life. It's been there through their life as a kind of coping mechanism and as a reliable friend. And for those people who've successfully changed, there's a certain point where they look at their current life and they look at what smoking's doing in their current life in terms of their relationships, their health, their wealth, all these kind of things. And they start to question whether it has a place. And as they start to question whether it still has a valid place, whether it's still fulfilling the original aims and needs that it did all those years ago, there's a certain level of dissatisfaction and frustration with it. As that dissatisfaction and frustration goes, there's this key first point, which is enough is enough. I'm going to change. Enough is enough. And at that point, that's the ideal time to go and arrange a call with a stop smoking expert who can help them get to the second point, which is, oh my God, I know I've made a change. Literally, I don't feel any cravings at all inside my body. I'm free. Now, let me let you in a little secret. This second stage, which we do in the session, can happen in maybe 20 minutes or 10 minutes or an hour. That happens very, very quickly for most people. Why? Because they've already got to the point of enough is enough. And in fact, we can get to that point of enough is enough during the strategy call, during the free consultation call that we do with clients. But the question is, what's going to get somebody to the point where they start feeling that motivation and they're heading in that direction of enough is enough? Remember, nobody really quit nobody made any really significant changes in their life unless they said, enough is enough. This is too important. I've got to get this handled. I've got to get a new job. I've got to step up here. I've simply got to find, I've simply got to either walk away from this relationship, or I've got to find this relationship, or I've got to make this change. Enough is enough. All right. And there's a second stage, which is where they literally go inside, and the second moment of change, where they look inside and go, I just feel totally different. I know it. All right. And this deep knowing that you've changed is really what a stop smoking expert can do. And yes, I can help a person get to the point of enough is enough, as long as they're headed in that trajectory anyway. All right. And what you can do is you can start orienting them in that trajectory. All right. It's a bit like a snowball at the top of a mountain. Okay. So if you approach this in the way that I'm going to be teaching you, what will happen is the energy and impulse and motivation to quit smoking is going to start to grow and grow and grow. This is beautiful. It's such an easy thing to do. All right. So there are these 2 moments of change, and your role really is to leverage and understand the deeper aspects of being there for a person and being able to ask them questions that don't antagonize them, whilst not trying to change them, but just modeling a sense of curiosity and compassion so that they can become more reflective about their situation. And as we start diving in deeper to the types of questions that you can ask, the way that you can ask those questions, then you'll realize that the 2 moments of change, well, these can be huge for a person, all right? But they need to go through that in their own particular way, all right? And remember, they're starting off from a position where on their journey through life, smoking is like a key point, right? It's like, it's become, it was an ally in their times of darkness, all right? But it's become a friend, really, an ally that they have, a mentor who they have outgrown, all right? And they have to see that for themselves. And so when you understand that the way that you ask questions can help them to reflect without trying to change them, then paradoxically, they're more likely to change. All right. And we'll be diving in deeper to this. It may seem like a paradox now, but really it's as simple as understanding this. If I say, oh, you really should stop smoking, it's really bad for you, you should really give it up now. All right. Right. That you're all the person's left with is a feeling of feeling bad. Even if they do manage to do it, they've got just this nagging sense that the person's going to say, well, you should have done that ages ago. There's just no motivation there. They're just basically left feeling bad, feeling being told what to do. And they have compounded bad feelings upon the original bad feelings. However, if you are to ask, do you mind if I ask how you got started smoking? Can you hear the difference there? Like someone who's just interested in what you're doing. And have you ever had somebody who's like, oh, that's really interesting. Oh, how did you get into that? Or where did you two meet? Oh, really? You work in this area? Oh, how do you get into that? And and you have somebody who's there genuinely interested. Now, the key thing here is that you're not going to need to say very little. Have you ever met somebody who says, oh, that must be really good. Oh, you must really love that. Oh, you must really have enjoyed that holiday. And they're just full of, they're trying to agree with you. They're trying to help. But what they're doing is they're just living constantly, they're enjoying the sound of their own voice whilst giving judgments about you. Oh, you must be so happy that you're healthy now. Oh, it must be so good that you feel this way. Oh, it must be so good. And all you want them to do is shut up and listen. And you can shut up and listen by going, uh-huh, oh, interesting. All right, so we're going to look at how you can keep conversations going as well. And if you understand that people have gone through this life, they have this complex relationship with smoking, okay, and they have to understand and be able to look at it and really have a deeper understanding of its role in their life, what it's given them, but also what it's taking away now. And they need to reflect on that in their own time. They might be able to do that in one conversation, they might be able to do that in multiple conversations over a period of time. That's not really important. What's important is that they start to become curious and interested and fascinated in it, because fascination will keep a person engaged in their thinking to the point where they have different insights and they start to look at it differently. And let's face it, if a smoker starts to look differently about what's going on, well, then change does become possible. Okay, so this kind of golden rule again of we don't want to antagonize or cause defenses to come up. We don't want people to feel bad. We don't want anyone to feel bad. They already feel bad that this is the only way they've got to cope and that people are telling them to quit, and they have a sense of, maybe it's not that great for my health. We don't want to antagonize, we don't want them to do it. We want them to shift gears to the state of fascination and curiosity. And we do that by modeling it through our own attitude. Why? Because we know that fundamentally they're going to have to get on this trajectory towards enough is enough. I want to change this. But it's going to need a bit of psychological and mental and physical almost energy to get in that direction. And the shift towards doing that is going to begin by the way that they're thinking. All right. But that way of thinking needs to be laden with fascination and compassion, not judgment and self-reproach and guilt and all these things. All right. And that's the foundational role that you can play in these conversations, because you understand the 2 moments of change. You understand they've got to get up to this, enough is enough. And then only after that, the sort of, shall we say, the last hurdle of, oh yeah, oh, I can breathe now. I just don't feel that anxiety. I don't feel those cravings. All right. And remember, there's support available for that, but they're not going to be able to be willing to look and get to that point unless they're able to reflect inside their own minds on that. And you're the person who can do that, because you're modeling for them how to have compassion, how to be self-reflective, how to become more fascinated in their thinking about this whole thing. And let me tell you, it is deeply, deeply fascinating for smokers. Why? Because they've been doing it all their lives. They know they're in the smokers club. They know they're in this sort of special category that, quite frankly, used to be advertised as cool. It was even recommended in the 50s by the Surgeon General, wasn't it, in the United States, rather surprisingly. But that's marketing for you. The marketing tide has turned a little bit. But they have, there are associations that are being cool. There used to be associations on films to, smoking being cool. So they've grown up with all these kind of reference points. And you're the person who's helping them to become reflective and fascinated about this. And eventually they will start to have new insights and new ways of looking at it. That will snowball into this trajectory of enough is enough, which is the first moment of change, which obviously will then very, very naturally leads to the, what am I going to do now? Okay, let's get some help. Let's knock this on the head. Let's strike while the iron's hot. It's that second point of, okay, I just know it's changed. I know that I've transformed. And you know what? When you do things and you understand that and you play this foundational role, they will feel, quite rightly, that they've done it themselves. And you can just feel a warm glow of having been a Merlin-like character with kindness and gentleness and compassion, helping people to live longer, happier and healthier lives. But how cool does that sound? You want to have a conversation with someone, with a loved one, a neighbour, a friend, a colleague, family member, about quitting smoking. Here's how not to begin that conversation. Oh, you really should stop smoking. Or don't you think you should stop smoking? Oh, look, you're smoking a lot at the moment. Have you thought about quitting? Oh, oh, God, that cough's getting really bad. Oh, I really worry about you smoking. Oh, I don't know, you seem to be smoking a lot at the moment. Any of these gambits are basically laden with judgment and concern and a very clear meta message, a very clear sort of inference that that person should be quitting smoking. And here's the thing, we don't like being told what to do. All right. I remember, a while back being with somebody who their whole way of, their whole demeanor was, I know best. And so they would be there with other people. And the moment that somebody said something, they would simply tell them a story about somebody else who completely solved their problem. And it was easy. And they couldn't, and it was a very, very obvious pattern. And what it did was it just completely, I could see people just switching off around this particular person, all right, because they could tell that person was just simply trying to say, well, if they can do this, you can do it. All right, so you have to be very, very just mindful of the fact that if you go in like a bull in a china shop, you're not going to be helping somebody out. In fact, you're going to be strengthening their determination not to make any changes. Why? Because even if something is for our greater good, we want to feel that we have agency. I'll give you an extreme example of this. And I don't have the reference this, and I just remember hearing it as a sort of anecdotal thing. So hopefully it's just an anecdote. But it was years ago in care homes. They wanted to see the effect of having people having agency to be able to do things, and they in this story, so it goes, the folk had plants, and these old folk had plants, and they were looking after them. The plants were either taken away from them, or somebody else then came in and took over. So now they lost their ability to do that and nurture the plants themselves. And according to this story, those folk died quicker and had more health complications because of that. And that makes total sense. And like I say, it's a pretty extreme story. And by the way, there are other ones that are there are many versions of that definitely are referenced in the research literature. But what's interesting about this is we do know that when somebody has their agency taken away, however small, let's say somebody's in an office environment, they've had a certain privilege for a while, and that's taken away for no reason, then that person feels it has an impact on them. They feel resentful, they feel taken advantage of, they feel like their ability to choose, their freedom basically has been taken away. And you do not want to be one of those people. All right. Now, you may naturally have evolved those bad habits. If you've evolved those bad habits, then come and book a session with me, and we'll cure you of those. But really, you can do this yourself. All right. So you have to quit any bad habits of wanting to go around and change other people. All right. Because other people have the right to live their lives and do things the way that they want. Sure, the things other people do affect others. All right. But so do the way that we ask questions and interact with other people make a difference in other people. So if we want others to change, then best start by changing ourselves first. All right. So the way to do this is to understand that the conversations that you have with people are either going to irk them and piss them off and cause defenses to come up or antagonize them, or you're going to help them engage in reflective conversations. Now, over a period of time, when the trajectory is set towards, oh, enough is enough, I really want to quit, I've just looked at my life and enough is enough. At that point, absolutely fine, give them my number, put them towards the videos, give them my a link so they can book a session and come and see me, or whoever they want to go and work with. That's the point, to sort of jump on it, and you can help them to change. But you'll never get to that point if all your conversations antagonize people. All right. And let me tell you, I would say on balance, most people don't know how to begin conversations, particularly like this, without antagonizing folk. And in fact, with other areas as well, they think that they know better. They think that their worldly wisdom is going to suddenly be listened to and appreciated and taken on board. But let me ask you this: if you've ever had children, how much of your worldly wisdom is appreciated. And if you look back on your life, how many times does going up to somebody and just telling them how they should be doing things differently really make a difference? All right. By and large, it doesn't. Okay. In fact, almost never does it work. And even if it does work, it's going to be laden with resentment. Okay. And there's no point helping somebody to change if they resent you and don't want to be around you. And if they don't make that decision themselves and feel good about it, what are the chances that it's going to actually last? Especially when there are much, much better ways of doing it. All right. So just remember that the way not to begin a conversation about quitting smoking is to begin it with judgment. All right. If you begin it with judgment and trying to change somebody, or trying to make them feel bad about it, or saying that, really, come on, you've been smoking for so long, come on, isn't it time you made a change? All right. as a general rule, if you begin that, you're going to trigger defenses and antagonize them. Even if you go there with tears in your eyes saying, I'm so worried you're going to die. Well, they're going to feel bad. All they're going to do is now they're going to feel bad about the only way that they've got to manage and cope in their lives. All right. So you do have to step up a bit on this and learn a different way to begin your conversation. This gambit's going to be really, really important. Your kind of opening kind of way of thinking about this is going to be very, very important. The good news is there are loads of ways to do this, and we're obviously going to go into that. We're going to go into a lot of detail. Okay, so just remember not to begin conversations by your judgment, by your strong aversion to smoking, by your upset and concern for the other person. Remember not to begin it by making suggestions. Remember not to begin by combining those suggestions with judgment that they should be doing something different. Okay, and if you begin your conversations by not doing that, you will avoid the initial traps, the initial, shall we say, landmines that will blow up any opportunity for transformation. Then we can get into the nitty-gritty of how to begin a conversation about quitting smoking. How to begin a conversation about quitting smoking revolves around a very kind of subtle shift inside where you move towards more equanimity. When I say equanimity, I mean a calmness and compassion and consideration and sense of curiosity for how your friend, your colleague, your neighbor, your partner, how they got to this point in life, what role smoking played in their life. Aside from all the stuff that everyone knows about it being, not great for you, how did they get into that? What sustained it? What role does it play in their life? Now, when you have that kind of attitude in mind, that I'm not going to change someone here, I'm not going to judge them, I'm not going to make them feel bad, I'm just going to help them to become super curious about the role that smoking plays, then this is exactly where you can add huge value. Because the way to begin a conversation is for you to, no matter what questions you're asking, is to be in this, is to have adopted this mood, this attitude, this kind of general tone in your demeanor of, oh, that's really interesting. I wonder how they came to do this. I wonder what role it plays in their life. I wonder when they look at it in the totality of their life, what themes they can find in their life of how resourceful they are that they didn't even know. That might be a deep therapeutic or a deep sense of, create a deep sense of empowerment for them. And so the way to begin a conversation about quitting smoking is not to think about any specific questions, first of all. It's not to mention about quitting smoking. It's simply to make this internal shift inside you as the person who's asking the question, to be very, very mindful of your own state of mind. Because when you're in this more uptime, curious, fascinated kind of this fascinated way of being, other people will start to pick up on that. And we know this through the research on mirror neurons. And the research on this basically shows that, for instance, if somebody's watching a tennis match, the person watching can feel tired, fatigued, because in their mind, they're actually, they're quite often micro movements even going on in their body, but they are actually responding. Their brain is responding and tuned in to the way that people are playing tennis. And it's very much the same in our conversations, that the mood and tone that somebody brings is something that we pick up on. All right. And you know this, you've been around other people, some people who just inspiring and uplifting, and you finish the conversation, you feel incredible, you just feel alive. And there are other people, you walk out the room and oh my God. So you prefer those ones where you have those conversations with people and they just stimulate you. And they're through the mixture of the stories, their ways of being, the fact that they're interested in what you have to say, the fact they're curious, the fact they even like follow up and go, wow, that's really interesting, I really like that. The fact that they do that puts you at ease. And so the way to begin a conversation about quitting smoking is not to mention anything about smoke, about the actual mechanism of quitting. It's not to mention anything about having any judgments. It's simply to make sure that you are in the ideal state. And the ideal state, as we mentioned, is one of curiosity and fascination. All right. Because ultimately, smokers are either going to feel very, very bad about smoking and feel bad about their chances of quitting, or they could feel fascinated about what they're learning from having been through that journey in their life. Take those lessons and learnings about how important it is to meet emotional needs, for example, and the role that it's played, and find new ways to achieve the same higher intentions that the old behavior did, all in a state of fascination and curiosity and self-learning, which leads to great empowerment in their life going forward, bleeds into all other areas of their life, this greater awareness and metacognition, and this sense of absolutely that they can do anything they put their mind to, if and when they're able to look at the habit in the context of their life with a sense of fascination and curiosity, and not self-reproach and not self-judgment and not feeling bad. And who's the person who's listening to me right now at this very moment, who's learning skills that they can use to be able to help folk to change? Well, that's you, my friend. And the reason that you can do that is because you've made this crucial understanding that you begin any conversation by making sure that you are in this curious and fascinated state. And when you do that, well, then anything that comes out of you, the actual words that you utter, the way that you say them, are going to have this deep resonance. All right. Because remember that when Moravian and many other people have looked at kind of the quality of our communication, we have this kind of like classic kind of breakdown of, that 55% of the communication is body language, 38% is the tone of voice, the way that you say something, and only, the remaining, 7% or whatever, is the actual words that we use. Now, those words are important, but it's the way that they're asked. And the way that they are asked is a reflection of how you're feeling inside. So if somebody has deep judgment and is irritated, then that's reflected in their tone of voice. So their words become imbued with that, and what the other person picks up on is that irritation and judgment. If it's from a sense of curiosity and fascination, on the other hand, then that comes through in their tone of voice, and it gets really picked up on as the meta message, as the power message, as the deeper inference of what is asked. And then that supports the other person to go into this place of deeper consideration and transformation. And that, my friends, is how to begin a conversation about quitting smoking. And I would put it to you that it's the way to begin any conversation, any healthy conversation that you want to have with another human being. So there are 3 rules of conversations with smokers. All right. Before we dive into the specific questions that you can ask and the way that you ask them, the order and the way in which you're going to do that, you have a very strong framework now for how to help people in terms of your mindset, in terms of a deep appreciation of the journey that smokers take, the 2 points in their life they have to go to, the 2 moments of change, the role that smoking has played for them. And because of this, you can remember these 3 rules. Firstly, don't be trying to force and change. Secondly, listen deeply with compassion and curiosity. And 3, be the person who helps them tap into their aspirations about what they want in life. So let's look at this in a little bit more detail. All right. We don't want to be antagonizing people. We don't want to be triggering defenses. We don't want to be forcing them. We certainly don't want to be pushy. We don't want to try and change their minds directly. Why? Because we're just going to trigger defenses. All right. Most people think that if they can just turn up and tell people, oh, I've got this great idea, why didn't you do this? That's going to somehow change things. All right. And you've seen throughout your life this completely doesn't work. There are questions that can do the work. Questions do the work when you're in the right state. What state is that? The state of curiosity and compassion, of deep fascination. All right. You're fascinated in this other person. You're fascinated in the role smoking's played in their life. You're fascinated by their dreams and their aspirations. When you are fascinated by everything that they are bringing to bear in this conversation, well, you know what? They'll start to become fascinated too, because their mirror neurons will pick up on that fascination. So it's really, really important that you don't try to be pushy, that you don't try to force anything. And this is really, really important because it's something we know. You've experienced salesperson who's trying to force something on you. You've experienced politicians trying to. You've experienced all manner of people doing that. Even well-meaning people, even well-meaning people who you trust, who have a great idea for you. When it is presented to you in the form of, oh, you really should do this. How appealing is that, really? So don't do that, right? That's just, and this is something to be mindful of, because it's just a habit that is ingrained into us in our society, all right? And a lot of people will be doing this, okay? And so breaking that habit for yourself is going to be key to helping others, all right? And if you make suggestions and you find yourself falling off the wagon, don't judge yourself for it, all right? Just be mindful and come back again. And eventually what will happen is you will let that pattern will dissolve, that pattern will disappear, okay? Secondly, remember, look, you want to listen with curiosity and compassion, all right? Here's how not to do it. Have your mobile phone on the table, be picking it up and looking at stuff, asking questions, and then checking emails and messages in between, whilst looking up, once every 30 seconds to that person. Your phone should be down, ideally not anywhere, not even on the table, not visible. There's research around this, by the way. People feel more listened to when their mobile phone is not even visible. And you're there, and you are paying attention to the other person, okay? And when we get into asking questions, you'll literally maybe just ask one and sit back. You're going to be saying less probably than you've ever said before in your life. Why? Well, look, if you want somebody to be reflective, if you want to help somebody to reach a moment of insight inside their life, how are they going to do that if they just got this big monologue of somebody talking over them? Much easier if you're the person who is asking questions and just sitting there and listening to them. I mean, listen, as somebody who's worked now for well over 2 decades helping people transform, I can tell you that a major part of this is folk feeling that they're actually heard and listened to, because it doesn't happen in their families, it doesn't happen with their friends. They do get a certain amount of support from them, but people don't sit there and actually take the time to listen and really hear them. So when you can do this, well, it's deeply transformative. So you show you care, you take an interest in their answers, and you're not afraid to follow up on anything that they seem to care about. Okay, it's not an FBI interview. You're not. So when was this? When did this happen? When did that happen? At what point? At what time did you start smoking? And when did you start smoking after that? How old were you? And what were you doing when you smoked? And why did you do that? All right. This is not the way we're going to be doing it. All right. when you do ask the questions, you'll ask one, and you'll be sitting back, hopefully not saying too much, for several minutes. You can just nod, you can look, because you are not being pushy, and you're listening with full attention and compassion. And then thirdly, you're going to help them with their aspirations. All right. As we get into the questions here, the final kind of aspect of the questions that you're going to be asking will help them to envisage and create the life that they want to have happen without smoking. And whilst there can be a temptation to hurry to get to them, you do not want to be doing that. All right. And these questions, just to be really, really clear, you may ask them over a period of weeks or months. All right. It doesn't matter. It's far better to spend time asking follow-up questions about the initial question that you ask whilst listening. Because the more you listen, the more you'll connect. And the more they'll take these questions seriously. Because remember, we're helping people go through this reflective process, this metacognition, where they can have a deeper awareness of their awareness as they're looking back at their life and looking back at the role that this old habit has played and how long it's been there for them and what this has done. And to get them to that point, we really, really need them to be in a very positive space. We need them to be in a very we need them to feel that the future is going to be so much better than the past ever was. But you can't just rush there. All right. They have to, it's kind of like trying to learn to run when you're very out of shape. All right. It's going to take some time to build up the stamina, the muscles, the tendon strength, even the psychological side, the mental side, which is so important for, say, doing longer runs. And so to help people doing that, by accepting them as they are and listening carefully, by showing you care, by following up and modeling for them a deep sense of curiosity and fascination about the insights and awarenesses that they're having, that will help you to develop a deeper sense of awareness and a deeper sense of interest yourself in what they're saying. But more importantly, because you're going through that process and you're modeling it for them, they will start to internalize that. And as they internalize that, well, there'll come a point where shaping their dreams is very, very easy, because you'll be asking questions for them, but just don't be in a hurry to get to those questions, because look, somebody starting from scratch simply can't go out and run a half marathon or a marathon. All right, not without risk of exhaustion or injury. You need to build up to it. As a general rule, most people starting from nothing who are out of shape, they've got to take a little bit of time to build up for that. That time's going to vary, and it may be a lot shorter than you think, but there's going to be a certain way to approach that that's probably going to, certainly statistically, it's going to work for most people. Okay, given their own intrinsic motivation to do that. So if you remember not to be pushy in the way that you're approaching questions, so you let the questions do their work, and the questions work because you're bringing this approach of curiosity and fascination and not trying to change the other person or judging them. You're listening with compassion now. At a certain point, maybe in this conversation, a follow-up one, and maybe some way down the line, you can start to shape these dreams, if you will, because that's what the final set of questions will do. Okay, just don't be in a hurry to get to them. The more you listen, the more you'll connect, and the more they'll take these questions seriously. All right, it's like we're trying to get them in the slipstream of the questions that we're asking, and more than the questions, it's the slipstream of this general attitude of, this is really interesting. Your life is really interesting. This is a really fascinating aspect of your life. Let's consider it from this place of fascination and see what we can learn. And let's see how these learnings and lessons from this can empower the rest of your life. All right. But we just need to help them to join that. Okay. And for them to kind of, be able almost like to do that, to join in and to piggyback on that, we have to kind of lead ourselves from the front. And that's a beautiful place to be. So just remember, firstly, don't try and force any change. Secondly, be there fully focused, no mobile phone, no distraction, give them 100% of your attention. And then 3, when the time is ready, and that may be later on in the same session, or it may well be some other subsequent conversation. There's no rush to get to this, but you're going to help them to start to build kind of like a 3D model of the future, of how good it's going to be. And this is a kind of a life that they aspire to. Smoking won't be in that, but it's going to be something that's way, way better. That's so compelling that really, it's kind of like, would you like to stay in this dark, cold hole in the ground, in immersed in cold, dirty water, or would you like to have a relaxing time in the Caribbean, in a beautiful 5-star hotel, relaxing on the beach? That's the kind of sort of the strength of the way that it's going to be eventually, in terms of how they're going to feel about it and perceive it, as long as you approach it in the right way and as long as you remember these 3 questions. Very first question to ask somebody, to ask a smoker, so that you can engage in a conversation with them from this state of curiosity, where you're genuinely interested and you have this spirit of kindness and compassion, is, do you mind if I ask how you got started smoking? Now, that's the first question to ask. Here's how not to ask this question. Do you mind if I ask you how you got started smoking? Right? You see, that's very, very harsh. That tone, it's rushed, it's harsh, it's aggressive. Right? You do not want to be saying, do you mind if I ask how you got started smoking? Instead, you want this calm, sort of almost nonchalant, very reasonable kind of like, you're asking as a reasonable man, a reasonable person, a reasonable woman. Do you mind if I ask how you got started smoking? Or, do you mind if I ask how you got started smoking? My kind of favorite way is really just, do you mind if I ask how you got started smoking? Or, do you mind if I ask you how you got started smoking? And this is exactly the space you want to be in. When you are curious and fascinated, your fascination, interest in the other person, in how this whole journey of their life began, and you're doing that with them. Now, here's the thing: who goes around and has this level of fascination and compassion and caring for other people and interest in people's lives? All right? Very few people take the time to show any interest in us and to really be there and listen. And so when you are that person, it can be very, very deeply transformative for other people. Just the very fact that you're there and caring and listening will be very, very powerful for them. All right. And this is really where we want to start. Okay. Do you mind if I ask you how you got started smoking? And what this is doing in the sort of therapeutic circles, oftentimes, we like to talk about regressing back to original the original event and taking new learnings and lessons from this. And in a way, this is kind of doing this. This is saying, okay, whereabouts were you in time when this old habit started? And what was going on? And it's almost like a replay. It's going to be like a kind of a video replay for them of what happened back then. Of course, it's not an absolute video replay because, well, they were in the movie to start with, but it's going to start this process where they can start to think about and reflect on where they were and what was happening. And in fact, the very first question, of course, is, do you mind if I ask you how you got started smoking? Well, then you can follow that up. So what happened? Did you like it at first? Did you enjoy it? Did you really enjoy your first cigarette? Typically, when you ask this, by the way, if you say, did you like it at first? What was your experience? Most people, they're kind of coughing and gagging and they have to like force themselves almost to be able to continue. So then you can ask them, well, so why did you keep going? You know, what did you get out of smoking? Then you can finish up this kind of section of questions with, are you glad you got started? Now think about this. The key question here is, do you mind if I ask you how you got started smoking? So you've opened up a window here to say, let's discuss the original context in which you started. And typically it's going to be peer pressure. Typically some parent in their family will smoke, and that's created part of the context. And there was like a moment where there was an offer given to them to smoke, which they took because of the sort of probably positive associations, at least from seeing other peer members of their peer group at the time doing that. And of course, society is quite different now, by and large, in a lot of countries. The times have changed. But this is a class of investigation where you're saying, go back in time. And let's have a look at this again. All right, so it's a very powerful kind of window to open up here. Do you mind if I ask you how you got started smoking? Which is why we need to be very, very careful in our sense of compassion and curiosity when we're having such conversations with someone. All right, remember, we don't want to trigger defense mechanisms. We don't want to antagonize anyone with this. You say, do you mind if I ask you how you got started smoking? All right, it's like, do you mind if I ask you how did you meet your how did you meet your wife? How did you meet your husband? You know, how did you get into camping? How did you get into running? Any of these things are cause people to be able to really have. They open up a space for us to talk about something, some deeper needs inside us, and to develop a deeper sense of reflection. As long as when we ask the questions, we do what we need to sustain the conversation. All right, so we will look at that as a separate video, because it's really, really important, or a separate section after this, because you do need to be able to keep the conversation going. You need to be able to sustain the conversation. All right, but your gambit is always going to be, do you mind if I ask you how you got started smoking? Now, if they started smoking, there was something that happened first. There was something that happened before, there was something that happened first, and then there was the actual process, and there was something that happened afterwards. So that's really where you can ask these questions. You know, what happened? Did you enjoy it? Did you really enjoy the first puff? Very rare you'll find somebody who enjoyed the first puff. So I was like, oh, I coughed and I felt terrible. I had a bit of a headache. I was even sick. So what kept you going? Oh, I just didn't want to let anyone else down, you know, and you know, I'd sort of bought a pack and I really wanted to see what it did for me. So what did you get out of it? I don't know. I felt like I had enjoyed. I'd done something I wasn't supposed to, and I felt like this sense of freedom that I could do it. It was like my secret, and I felt like I just felt like I felt like I was a grown up. I felt like I was like one of the one of the people who I admired, and that now I had something that I was able to share with other people, to bond with them over, and it made me feel special. All right. Now, if you get if you start getting quality answers like this back, all right, what did you get out of it? Can you imagine how powerful this is? Imagine how powerful this is from a point of view of somebody who's going to be developing this self-reflective thing, to go back in time and really understand the full kind of dynamic, the should we say the socio-economic or the cultural or the just point of view, their peer views and their familial kind of context, and the impact that had on their decision to engage in a behavior. All right. I mean, who takes the time to do this? Who takes the time to ask someone and even be interested and be there for them? And when did they ever do this in their lives? Well, until you did this, probably never. And then you can finish up this particular kind of like set of follow-up questions around this very first kind of like main area of, do you mind if I ask you how you got started smoking? That opens this window up into this sort of the initial sets of triggers, and you can finish up with, are you glad you started? Now, you're not going to lead with that kind of, and remember, this is all in the context of this first question, but at a certain point, are you glad you started? Well, that's really interesting. Isn't that interesting? All right. Can you notice the difference here between going up to somebody and saying, you really shouldn't smoke, and asking them, do you mind if I ask you first got started smoking? Oh, did you like it at first? Oh, let me ask you, I've got a really interesting question here. Are you glad you started? All right. In a way, what we're doing is we're saying, as you go back in time here and reevaluate the initial conditions where you started, and if you were back then now in a time machine, would you, knowing everything you know now about the decisions and how your life has gone, and the fact you've been a slave to this ever since, are you glad you started? And would you make the same decision now? All right. So are you glad you started? It's very, very powerful in this context, because it's saying, look, you made this decision to start, which means you can make a decision to stop. Given everything that you know now, are you really glad that you did this? Is this what you wanted? Is this really what you want? So it's a very, very powerful question to ask, because that's going to start to tap into both their kind of their logical understanding. No, I'm not so sure. And there'll be something physical inside, something deeper and emotional and psychological. This is going to start moving them into the slipstream. Okay. And you might find that this particular conversation is plenty to begin with someone. All right. And it might be that you meet, you have a friend or family member who you meet every few days, every few weeks, and you just, you'll continue these questions in this light. You may be able to do them all in one go, but there really is no, there's no kind of sort of problem with this. Okay, there's no problem with trying to just have one question and have a couple of follow-ups, or asking the rest of the questions in one go. All right, because there's kind of like 4 main questions, and they'll all have subsets of questions inside them. But this first one, do you mind if I ask how you got started smoking? Ask in this sense of curiosity, in the sense it's no big deal. It's no big deal for whether they reply or not, or whatever level they want to engage with. When you bring that spirit to that, and you follow up with what happened. Did you like it at first? What kept you going? What did you get out of it? Are you glad you started? This is going to create the context of of helping a person to start to look at the reasons they began, and really, would they choose that now? All right, this is the key thing, because if they were, I mean, how many people will say they're glad they started? I'm sure there'll be a number, but most people will start to, when they honestly think about it, they'll at least have a little bit of conflict inside them. All right, and if you're not glad you started, it's implied, would you really be glad spending the rest of your life doing something that you weren't happy, that you weren't glad that you did back then, knowing everything that you know now? So there's a lot going on here, and that's why I say the most important part is to have this attitude of curiosity and compassion, not try to change the other person, to turn it into a self-reflective inquiry, because it's going to be a big change for a person, and they have to own that and have gone through and evaluated that in their own way. And honestly, if somebody goes through and evaluates it and says, you know what, I'm glad I started, because it's just something I can depend on, and I love every second of it. Right? There'll be a small number of people who fall into that category, very, very small. It'll be very, very unlikely that you'll meet them unless you deal, like I do, with hundreds and hundreds of people. And even then, there are opportunities for reflection, but most people will start to shift into the trajectory. It's really a question of time, and it's a question of feeling that they are doing that on their own terms and in their own time without anyone pushing them. Okay, and some people will be very, very sensitive to this, and those people are called smokers. All right, so if you want to change things for them, just create the right space and maintain that space. Okay, so the first question is, do you mind if I ask how you started smoking? Begin with that, take your time, follow up on it, and we'll have a look now in terms of how you can follow up and how you can sustain the conversation. When you are asking these questions, and whether you're asking the very first question, do you mind if I ask you how you got started smoking? You want to be able to sustain the conversation about quitting smoking. And you'll do this in a couple of different ways. You're going to do this by the way that you ratify what they say, and by asking follow-up questions. Okay. So ratification is really, really important. And what we mean by ratification is that when somebody says something, there's a difference between looking away and be checking your phone and just going, yeah, all right, or being fully present for them and going, oh, that's interesting, nodding, looking them in the eyes, wow, oh, that's interesting. Now, what happens is the ratification statements basically say to somebody, they communicate at this subconscious power message and meta message level, I'm interested in what you have to say, what you say matters. And by emphasizing your interest at certain points where you can see that an insight is coming through, you're also subcommunicating back to them, hey, stop for a moment and really think about this. Oh, that sounds interesting. So for instance, if somebody says, oh, I was there I'd seen my mum smoking, and then my uncle pulled out some cigarettes and said, hey, do you want to try one with me? And I thought, wow, I get the chance to be like an adult. And if you just sit there and go, right, oh, that's not very good. Oh, you shouldn't have done that. Or you're looking away at your phone, or you go. So that will create one set of feelings in the other person, what we call feeling bad and feeling invalidated and feeling judged. Or you can come back and say, oh, that's interesting. Now, you don't need to say anything more on this. All right. And it may be that at that point, when you've ratified it, the other person is thinking, God, that is interesting. And they may even be quiet for a moment as you see them really looking around in their mind, in their memory, contemplating it. Resist the temptation to butt in at this point. Stay there quiet and peaceful for them, looking intently. gently nodding your head. And this ability to ratify, to wait and allow them to process your ratification statements or the emphasis that you give through your non-verbal communication, your body language, your head nods, your smiles, your eye contact, and the nice warm tone of voice that comes through and is reflected in this attitude and mood of compassion for the other person, can be deeply, deeply transformative. And then when you ask follow-up questions, you're going to be asking in that same spirit. All right. You see, there's a difference between saying, do you want to ask how you got started smoking? Oh, I was out with friends, and then they pulled this cigarette out and they offered it to me, and I just, something inside me said, oh, I'm one of the guys now. I've got friends. And there's a difference between somebody saying that to you, this big revelation and insight into their life, and you say, what happened? Did you like it at first? Why did you keep going? What did you get out of it? Are you glad you started? There's a difference between going FBI straight away or going down the route of, wow, this sounds huge. Or they say, I was there with my friends and I just realized I was going to be one of the guys. And you're like, yeah, right. Oh, I get that. Yeah, that makes total sense. Sounds like there was this huge thing about connection and acceptance and friendship. Did I catch that right? Yeah, this is massive. It's like that very first time I absolutely hated it, but it was something that gave me something in common with other people. Now, I mean, I could be accepted, I could have friends. And you're like, that's amazing. It seems like a really huge insight. Yeah. Hey, look, if you want to take a moment just to really sit with this, I totally get it. Because this is big. Now, you don't even need to say that, by the way, when you're with them. But that's what I mean. You're so fascinated, present, and curious because your mobile phone is nowhere to be seen, remember. You are here for that person, not taking calls, not checking your WhatsApp. You're there and paying attention to them. And so now you can ratify what's being said, and you can take it to a nice deep level. Okay, so what the ratification does is it indirectly communicates back to the other person, hey, stay with this line of thinking a bit longer. Why? Well, look, remember, we're trying to get the energy up for them to get towards this first point of enough is enough. But to do that, they've got to get in the slipstream. It's like the snowball at the beginning needs to have you sort of pushing it up the top of the peak of the mountain and just getting it there and letting it get a bit of momentum, gather up snow, starting it to push it down, and eventually, or they're rather starting to do that. So there's a lot of energy in the beginning. Eventually, that snowball will gain its own momentum and it will maintain that. But you've got to get to that point first. So it's really important to sustain conversations through ratification. Okay. And then when you ask those follow-up questions, so what happened? Did you enjoy smoking your very first time? Why did you carry on smoking when you were coughing? What did you get out of it? And are you glad you started smoking? That's a really, really weird question, but are you glad you started smoking? So you'll keep conversations going through one question at a time. All right, that's really, really important. All right, I see so many people saying, "Are you glad you started?" And then the other person goes to answer, the smoker goes to answer, "Oh, are you happy? Do you think it's a good idea? Do you like the fact you started?" And it's like, man, you just asked me 5 questions, and instead of giving me the opportunity to answer, so be the person who asks one question and shuts up. If they need you to restate it, or they didn't hear you, or they don't understand the question, by all means restate it. But ask it once and then shut up. And remember, the follow-up questions only have power when they're starting to give them momentum to get into the slipstream, when they're starting to follow along, and it will only stay there. They'll only stay in the slipstream as long as you stay curious and non-judgmental. When you're kind, when you're curious, when you're interested. Okay. And the way that you help them to stay there is by ratifying what they've said through eye contact. You know, if they say, oh, you know, it was just being friends with everyone. I knew that, whew, this is a huge insight. I really feel that was the first time I was accepted. You can feed that back to me. See, first time you were accepted. First time you were accepted. And just feeding that back to them will cause them to light up. It'll cause them to stop. They'll probably pause. They'll probably be shifting their breathing. Their colour in their face might change, and they have this deep, deep insight, or a set of deep, deep insights into their life. And your role is simply to be present and observe this. Now, you can, as we've said, you can do this through phrases like "go on, tell me more," or "wow," or "uh-huh," or "right, that makes total sense," or "wow, this seems huge." So you're ratifying stuff that they're saying, okay? And you don't have to ratify every single thing they're saying, but you do need to be making eye contact. You need to be nodding, and certainly when it's an important thing, you do need to be saying something. Wow, yeah, this is huge. All right, to keep them in that space. And when they get to a point where they're basking in the glow of insight, you can just say, "This is huge," or, you know, "Hey, it's probably, it seems like you're really like thinking about this one," and just leave them there. Let them be comfortable, paying a light sense of attention to them with a sense of curiosity and compassion, and let them do that. And when you do that, well, now you're sustaining the conversation. You'll keep the conversation going, and the follow-up questions will have great power. Okay, because you are ratifying what they're saying. You're in essence validating what they're saying through your verbal and non-verbal language, and you're communicating the compassion that you have in this modeling of fascination, that they're fascinating and what they have to say is fascinating, by giving them 100% of your available attention. I mean, who does this? So that's exactly what you want to do. When you do this, you can sustain conversations, your follow-up questions will have great power, and you'll be truly, truly helping a person to change and transform. So the first question you asked is, do you mind if I ask you how you got started smoking? And you followed up on this. You know, what happened? Did you like it at first? Why did you keep going? What did you get out of it? Are you glad you got started? There'll come a point, either in this conversation or a subsequent one, where you'll want to ask the next key question. And that key question is this: why do you smoke now? All right. Remember, we've already gone to the past, and we've looked at the kind of the sort of surrounding kind of context there. Then we're asking, so why do you smoke now? Now, what this is doing is it's really pulling them back into the present. This idea, this question, why do you smoke now? It's really pulling them into the present. And by doing this, after we've gone to the past to evaluate why they started and what kept them going, what the context was there, we're now saying, well, let's compare that to the present. That was then, but this is now. Now we're implying that without saying it. We're not saying it consciously and logically, because we run the risk of defensiveness and antagonism there. All right. And remember, we are taking the road here of insight leading to personal change, which requires self-reflection. It requires the ability to look at things differently, to contemplate things differently, to discuss things differently. So when you say, why do you smoke now? All right, we're doing that in the present. Now we've got this big contrast because they've already been to the past. And now we're looking at it today and we're saying, well, look, that was then, but this is now. And things do change, the context changes. So when you say, why do you smoke now? Well, that's brilliant, because now we can use all the ratification, all the follow-up, everything else that we've been building on inside this sense of curiosity and compassion to say. So when do you smoke? What does it do for you? What do you really get out of? What do you really get out of smoking? Okay. So bearing in mind all these things you get out of it, would you recommend it to others? Would you recommend other people take up smoking? How come you would? How come you wouldn't? Recommend it, that is. So these are going to be a really interesting sort of like area, okay? Because we've been to the past and we've asked, you might have asked how you got started smoking. And are you glad you started? Well, now we're in this present, we're in the present day. So why do you smoke now? When do you smoke is the invitation, the follow-up invitation to find out those times of day. Is it when you're bored? Is it when you're stressed? Is it to relax? Is it for something to do with your hands? Is it what you do when you're communicating with someone you love? Is it something you do after a meal? Is it a ritualistic process to be able to sit down and contemplate and appreciate a coffee? Whatever it is, well, that's really, getting those times of day and those triggers is going to be very, very deep. It's going to be very powerful, because that's really what we're going to have to break. We're going to have to break it down, the nitty gritty and the day-to-day life, to be able to make a change of, well, when it actually happens. All right. But now they're getting greater insight into it in light of the original decision all those years ago to stop smoking, which they may well be reevaluating in light of the fact that we said, are you glad you started? And now we're asking, so why do you smoke now? All right. And you can see why any one of these questions could be a whole conversation, or could be multiple conversations. All right. We'll look later on about how you know that this is being successful, but I want to give you a little heads up here. Any one of these questions has the ability or the opportunity for you to be able to get so much closer to someone, to a loved one, to really understand them. All right. When you listen with compassion and non-judgment and understanding. And what'll happen is, the next time that you see them, chances are they're going to say, I was really been thinking since we were talking last time. It's been, and they'll tell you how their thinking's been changing, the insights that they're having. All right. And at that point, what you want to do is you want to say, that's great. I've been helping you to stop smoking. You want to stop smoking now? No, you do not want to do that. Just to be clear. All right. That is the kind of goofy shit that will totally torpedo anything out of the water. All right. Oh, yes. I was actually being nice to you in the conversation because I wanted to, and bought you flowers because, I wanted to have my way with you. No. All right. You do not want to bring in goofiness at this point. All right. What you want to do is you want to say really, you want to help them. This is just a little heads up we're going to be talking about later. Like, this sounds like really important. Oh, good on you. Or, yeah, it sounds like that was a really powerful conversation. And you know what? Because you've just ratified the fact that they had an insight about the last time that you guys had a conversation. You know what? They're going to want to continue more. And this is where the opening comes in. This is where you might well start going into, well, look, you've had a lot of insight about, sounds like you had a real insight into how it all started. Yeah. So bearing that in mind, why do you smoke now? Or why do you think you smoke now? And they'll start off with, well, it's just a habit. Yeah, just a habit, isn't it? It's just a habit. So remind me, when do you smoke? Now you've got the opportunity. Now they'll start giving you, these are just invitations for them to be able to carry on and keep the conversation going. So I don't know. I do it in between. I do it whenever I finish a work task during the day. All right. So you do it in between a work task. Any other times? So I do it at the end of the day. Okay. Any other times? Sometimes when I'm socializing. Okay. So what does smoking do for you? I don't know. I think it just helps me to relax and let go of stress. Oh, that's interesting. So it helps you relax and let go of stress. Yeah, I think so. Okay. It helps you relax and let go of stress. So bear in mind it helps you relax and let go of stress. Would you recommend smoking to others? What? Yeah, I'm just curious because it helps you relax and helps you with stress. Would you recommend it to other people? Well, not really, because I have this cough. It costs a load. I have a cough, and I'm pretty worried a lot of the time about the impact on my health. Right. Okay. So how come you wouldn't recommend it to others? Because it can help relax. It can help deal with stress. Well, it doesn't. It might help in that moment deal with stress, but there's a lot of stress that comes outside of it, and also I have to spend all my time excusing myself in meals. I feel a bit embarrassed. I can't get through a whole meal without stopping smoking. It's not the greatest. So can you see now how powerful these questions are when you're asking them? All right. Start off in the past. Do you mind if I ask how you got started smoking? And perhaps in the same conversation, or perhaps in a follow-up one, we're going to ask, why do you smoke now? And then you can go through to when do you smoke? And you can follow up with that. You can ask them, you can repeat back the times of the day that they said. You can ask them, are there any other times? What does it do for you? What do you get out of it? Do you recommend it to others? And how come you would or how come you wouldn't? All right. This second question, why do you smoke now, is providing the kind of a contrast frame between the initial thing in the past and the initial thing in the present. And that is it's very, very powerful when it's underpinned by ratification, by the sense of curiosity and compassion, and also by pausing strategically. Remember, you're going to ask one question at a time, then be quiet, whilst giving them 100% of your attention. And making sure that when there's anything out there that you observe as a deep and powerful insight, that you follow up with that. And that is the second question to ask smokers, to help them start to move on this slipstream towards getting to the first moment, to help them to transform into non-smokers. The third question to ask smokers falls on the back of the first two, of course. The first question being, do you mind if I ask how you got started smoking? The second, why do you smoke now? The third kind of core kind of set of sort of investigative questions that we've opened up inside this window is, so how long have you smoked? All right. Now we're going in deeper. Okay. Now we've had the past, we've had the present with the second question. Now in this third question, we're kind of looking at it over this longer period, the trajectory of their life. Okay. So how long have you smoked? Bear in mind that the average smoker starts age 15. And quite often it's usually later on in life. So we'll be talking, it's very common to have a number of decades here, or quite a number of years. But it may be shorter, might be 6 months, might be a year, might be whatever, but it's typically longer. Okay. So when you say how long have you smoked, we're asking them to really look back and see that initial decision has had a lot of consequences through behaviors. If you think about, I don't know, exercising or some behavior that you would want to do that's positive for you, if you were like, oh, I've been running now and keeping fit for 20 years, you'd be like, kudos to you. But if somebody said, well, I've been doing this behavior for 20 years that I'm not glad that I started, that I really wouldn't recommend to anyone else, and I've been doing it for 20 years, do you think that's going to start at some level? There's going to be some cognitive dissonance. There's going to be some kind of sense of a nagging feeling that something ain't right, but without being the person who is nagging, rather it being their own conscience at a deeper level. So this idea of how long have you, this question, how long have you smoked? You know, when did you get started? If you could go back and start over, would you do it again? And of course, you can ask these kind of key questions as well and follow up. Did you ever try to quit? Why? What happened? Why did you start again? Are you glad you started again? Now, remember, I'm giving you these examples of questions that you would ask one at a time. You only ever ask one question at a time. And it is fine for them to take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, 5 hours contemplating that question with you, okay? Because you can ask follow-ups to any of these questions. That sounds interesting. Tell me a bit more about this. Oh, you mentioned something really important here. Well, that sounds really significant. Tell me more about that, okay? So you're constantly ratifying, you're constantly going through, and wherever you are in this kind of like, whether you're in the first question, which is in the past, do you mind if I ask how you got started smoking? Whether you're moving into the present, with the second question, why do you smoke now? Or this third one of how long have you smoked? So you're looking back at the whole kind of timeline of your life, of their life, of like when they started. If you could go back and start over, would you do it all again? It's another variation of, are you glad you started? But now we're going back again. We've gone to the past, we've gone to the present. Now we're looking at the totality of their life. And we're saying, as you think about it now, would you want to go all the way back and do that again? And then as you can contemplate the totality of your life, did you ever try to quit? What happened? So now we're going to be getting out the blocks and the concerns, the real kind of like worries about being able to make this change. All right. Why did you start again? Are you glad you started again? I mean, look, somebody who's gone through their life and tried to quit probably didn't feel great that they failed. Are they really going to feel glad that they started again? Are they going to really feel glad that they started again? Somebody who's been through their life and made this, and really tried and fallen off the wagon probably multiple times. Maybe not, but it's very common that smokers have tried many times. I mean, I have people who tell me, it's their 1,000th time or their 100th time. All right. So when you ask, how long have you smoked in this context? When did you get started? If you could go back, would you do it all again? This is where this deeper, evaluative, questioning, reflective kind of contemplation of their life now, they're going to start to be thinking a bit differently. Did you ever try to quit? Well, I did. What happened? Just had these cravings. It was so hard. I just felt like I couldn't cope. Well, now they're bringing out the subconscious, deeper elements around smoking, so that later on, maybe this conversation or other conversation, when you'll make an invitation to them to get some help or some support, it's in light of this deeper understanding of, okay, this is the real block. I'm not continuing this habit because I enjoy it. It's not because I think that it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. It's not because I think it's truly transformative and helping me. It's because of this set of feelings or this worry about cravings that I don't think I can get past by myself. All right. And you're helping them get to this point in their contemplation by asking, did you ever try to quit? Why? What happened? Why did you start again? Are you glad you started again? And remember, just to be very, very clear, if I was teaching this in a course, we would do it over several days and we would role play this and we would ask one question and then we would come back and debrief. I'm giving you examples of the questions you can ask, not so that you can ask them bullet point style, FBI investigation style, but so you know the questions. And please, it's implied that you ask one question and you sit back and you give the person you're with all the time and space that they need to transform. Okay. And that's the third question. How long have you smoked? And of course, it comes on the back of going to the past. Do you mind if I ask you how you got started smoking? Coming into the present. Why do you smoke now? And then this third question, how long have you smoked? Which really pulls together stuff. And now it'll start giving a richer kind of the relationship between the past and the present and this journey of smoking for them so that they can transform. We've had a real interesting journey here. We've started off with the question of, do you mind if I ask how you got started smoking? We've had the second question, why do you smoke now? We've had the third question, how long have you smoked? And now we're into this aspirational phase where we can ask, do you ever wish that quitting was easy? Now, let me let you in on a secret here. Smokers wish quitting smoking was easy. Most smokers want to quit. They don't like various aspects of it. They don't like the fact it costs money, it causes them to cough, all this stuff. But it's their way of, rewarding themselves and managing life. They don't want to feel bad about failing, and they don't want to. They get frustrated with all the other people around them making them feel bad. But of course, they wish that quitting smoking was easy. No one wants it to be harder than it needs to be. All right. So this question, do you ever wish that quitting was easy, is a wonderful aspirational question. And really what it's saying is, if you knew you couldn't fail, would you go ahead and quit smoking? If you knew you couldn't fail, like if you went to sleep at night, somebody waved a magic wand and you had this wish before you went to bed that you could stop smoking, it was just going to be no big deal, no urges, no cravings, no anxiety, no worry, no bad habits, no struggling, no bad moods, no anger, no depression, no feeling a sense of missing out, none of this. You just woke up. If you knew that quitting was that easy, would you want it? Who wouldn't want that? All right. Most people would choose that. So the question, do you ever wish that quitting was easy, is very, very important. Now, it's not the gambit. It's not a question that you lead with, okay? This comes with on the back of the other questions that we've asked. And crucially, you have to maintain over a period of time this non-judgmental attitude towards the person who you're talking with. All right. Well, you're not trying to change them. You're not trying to force them to do anything. You'll just remember modeling this state of mind of fascination. Okay. Because what will happen is they will internalize that and then they will make the decision themselves, which means they will maintain that and they will follow through on that. All right. So do you ever wish that quitting was easy? All right. If you could avoid anxiety and be more calm than ever before, but you had to quit smoking to get it, would you do it? It's just another variation of this question. They say, oh, I did it I took up smoking because I just remember I was one of the people, I was one of the guys, I had some friends. So if you knew you could have that sense of having friends more than you ever had before, but you had to quit smoking to get it, would you do it? Or if you could have more, if you could have that, if you knew you had that connection to people, or you could have that connection with other people and friendship than ever before, and you could do it without smoking, Is that something you'd want to have more of? Or is that something you'd want to have? All right. Now, what will happen is people are going to say, if you say, do you ever wish that quitting was easy? People are going to say, if you could have more, for instance, if you could have more calm or more happiness or more connection or more friendship, as we gave in that example, than ever before, but you had to quit smoking to get it, would you do it? People are going to reply one of two ways, no or yes. If they say no, you just ask, oh, that's interesting. How come? Right? You're not going to be going, oh, that doesn't sound right. Or, well, I wasn't expecting you to say that. No, because remember, the whole point here is that you're building up a sense of trust and rapport through your non-judgmental attitude where you're kind and compassionate and curious and modeling that curiosity so they can internalize it. So if they say, no, well, no, I don't think so. You'd say, oh, how come? And what will happen is they will tell you, well, I'm sorry, I just want to be able to, I want to know that I can get through my day and I can relax. So that's where you can ask, so what if quitting were easy and you could get through your day and you could have more of those feelings of being able to get through your day and relax too? All right. So what you're going to be asking is if somebody says no, you can follow up with, if they say no, then you can just say, well, how come? And they say, I just want to be able to relax. I need to be able to deal with stress. Okay, so then you can say, well, you can ask them a follow-up question. What if quitting were easy and you could have a way to deal with stress and relax more, even more than you do now? So what if quitting were easy and you could deal with stress and be more relaxed than you've ever been before? Would that be something you're interested in? All right. Now you're going to move them in that direction. Okay, because you're acknowledging what they're saying, which is no. And they're not saying no, that's a bad idea, or no, I don't want this. They're saying no because they're starting to get in contact now, very, very deep contact with the essence of what's going on. The fact that this is their way of coping with stress, for example, or dealing with anxiety, for example. It can be many other things, but it's or a feeling of friendship, and it reminds them of friendship and connection and dealing with other people, for example. All right. And the associated fear of loss with that, and the fear that it's going to be very hard and that they're going to be embarrassed and they're going to fail and feel terrible for it, or that they're missing out. What you're saying is, no, how come? And you're saying, and you're just asking, what if it was easy and you get to keep all the good feelings that you want? All right. Which is another way of saying, what if you could achieve the higher positive intention that the old habit gives you, maintain those good feelings and connection, but now have different choices that aren't only smoking? And you knew it was easier. But we're asking it more conversationally than that. Of course, if you were to say, do you ever wish quitting smoking was easy? If you had more calm, but you had to quit smoking to get it, would you do it? They might say yes. And then you can, well, that's where you can get very aspirational with them straight away. What do you think that would be like? Would you be glad you quit under those conditions? All right. So now you're asking them. And that's why this is the invitation question, really. Do you ever wish that quitting was easy? Because we're opening up another window now to an invitation to consider a new future and any help, or first of all, what that future is going to be like, and any help that may be helpful to create that future. So they'll either say no, in which case you can say, how come? And you can come back with, what if quitting were easy and you could have more of those feelings you want to? Or they might say yes, and then in which case you're into, what do you think that would be like? Well, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. So you can really take some time here to, even just with one of these questions, to really let them build up this picture of the future. Would you be glad you quit under those conditions? It's basically saying, is there any, bearing in mind everything we've talked about so far, do you have any objection to quitting if you got to keep all the feelings that you got, if everything was addressed and it was easy, Is there any real objection when all those things are in place? And most likely they're going to say no. But if there is something that's been missed, like, oof, I don't know how I deal with it on a really difficult day. Like, I know if someone was mean to me. All right. So now what they're saying is, okay, I will need to be reassured that in my darkest times that I can still cope. And you could say, look, I totally get that. Totally get that. So what if quitting were easy and you were better able to cope in the dark times and had less of them than ever before? Would that be something you're interested in? Now you're acknowledging it, and now you're saying it's not, in their minds, it's exclusive. You either have smoking or you don't, and you struggle when the difficult times are happening. And what you're saying is, hey, hang on a minute. What if you could quit smoking to be easy, and you could manage those times? I manage them better than ever before. Maybe even have less of the dark times, because you're just feeling calmer in general and happier, and feeling so proud of yourself for having made all these changes that you decided to do. That's where the beauty of this comes in. So the final step of the invitation is this question. If I knew someone that could guarantee you would quit, like you just described, would you be willing to talk to them for, 15 minutes, just to find out what they know? And that's where you can refer somebody. That's where you can, you're very welcome to give them my Calendly link, where they can book a session with me, free consultation, free strategy call, or you can refer them wherever you wish to. Of course, that's my bread and butter, helping people then when they're in that slipstream to get to that first place of enough is enough. And then during the session, really transforming that to, I know I've changed. But this is really important. At this point, if I knew, and this is not pushy, you're not saying you need to do this or you need to speak to this guy. You're just saying, look, if I knew somebody who could guarantee you'd quit like you just described, would you be willing to have a conversation with them? Willing to have a quick chat for 15 minutes, 10 minutes, just to find out what they know? All right. Now, can you see, with the overall context that we've created with all these questions and the way that we've gone through this, how powerful this is? Okay. And here's the thing, all right? You're not rushing this, all right? It's the difference between being offered a present that you really don't like and somebody like checking in with you. Oh, have you opened your present? Oh, have you got this? Are you enjoying this new present that I got you? And you keep following up on this new present that they've got for somebody that they didn't ask for and they didn't really even want, and that you've just given to them. And now you want them to continually kind of show appreciation for this thing that you spent money on that really they didn't ask for and they don't like. Or a present and a gift that somebody receives, that's given with kindness and love, with only one thing in mind, that brings joy to the other person. And that you know that this gift is very likely to be well received because you've spoken about it, because they've indicated it. So when you get to this kind of like final part of going through this question of, do you ever wish that quitting was easy, finishing with, if I knew somebody that could guarantee you'd quit like you just described, would you be willing to have a chat with them for 15 minutes just to find out what they know? It's in the spirit of this gift for them. And when you do that, it's much more likely to be received, much more likely to stay with them. All right, this whole kind of context, the whole way that we're going through here, the whole way that we're doing this, is that we want to make sure that they truly transform. Okay, we want to make sure that they transform. Okay, we want to make sure that it's done in but transformation really happens through, it's not the way that most people might think. The transformation happens by a new way of thinking. That new way of thinking happens through self-reflection, and being able to grow in insights, but being able to do that, to be able to have those insights come up, you need to have a context of compassion and curiosity. And of course, where are you going to get compassion? Where are you going to learn compassion and curiosity if you didn't learn it at home, and you have all this judgment of being of being a smoker or a failed smoker? All right. So it's so important that we create that context for them, because we're in essence modeling how to think differently and how to have different insights about their life and how to be able to make new conclusions about what's even possible. So this is really, really huge. But to do that, we need to be very respectful in the way, and hopefully that's really clear now, the way that we ask questions and the way that we do that, because those people who are smoking, they're not fools, right? They, like all of us, have gone through our lives and they have learned particular ways of dealing with things. They've learned particular ways to enjoy life, to respond to life. The habits that we've all accumulated habits, all right? And changing habits can be tricky when especially when we think it's going to be hard, and especially when there's a lot of judgment from other people and judgment from ourselves. So we're opening up a space here, a transformative space of this more metacognition, this greater self-awareness, its ability to look at things and evaluate it differently. But we're saying, hey, just abandon, let go of all the stress, let go of all the worry, let go of all the judgment. That's got no place here. From this position of curiosity and interest, let's see what we can learn. Let's see what we can discover. And after all, doesn't that sound a better way? Doesn't sound a better way to do it. It's going to be more fun for the people who you want to help. It's worth finishing off here now, really, in considering a couple of things about the questions that we've talked about that you're going to be using, that you're going to have. Remember, these questions and this attitude you can bring to all conversations and really any kind of change. And I'd invite you to actually take some time in your life to just pay more attention to people and ratify what they're saying and really seek to listen, because it happens so rarely. But just be aware that these questions are very powerful and transformative, all right? You do not need to ask them all in one go. You're going to be asking one question at a time, and it's fine to take time with that one question, okay? It's fine to take as long as you want with that one question. And you don't need to ask all the questions in one go. You might spend several days, if you've seen that person regularly, just following up on one question. Or you may possibly be able to have one long conversation where you go through all of it. The key is this: don't rush, because it's going to be the consistency of your response and your behavior that's going to be the model for that person. In fact, the benefit of asking these over a period of time is you're continually nudging that person to develop this new way of reflecting on their life, to evaluate from a position of fascination and curiosity that you're modeling through them. Okay. And that's why it's the consistency of your response and behavior is really going to be foundational, because first of all, you're like a mirror for the other person. And if you go, oh, that's terrible, or oh, why haven't you done anything about this yet? You're just throwing back, you're just mirroring back judgment and recrimination and guilt and shame and all these things for them. Whereas when you go, oh, wow, that's really interesting, if they come and say, you know what, I've been thinking about our conversation the other day. I don't know, it's just something just feels different. Wow. Now you're mirroring back for them that is something noteworthy and positive that they've engaged in. All right. And you have to allow some time. How long? How long is a piece of string? Might be a few minutes, a few hours, could be a few days, a few weeks. But the point is, by you consistently being the person who's kind and compassionate and non-judgmental, you will open up doors, you will open up windows. All right. And what will happen is, in between those conversations that you have, you will know you're on track, because they'll be saying things to you like, you know, you got me thinking, you really got me thinking here. All right. And remember, this is where people blow it. All right. You know, they go, oh yeah, you know, I always hated you smoking. I always hated smokers. I always thought you were really weak-willed, you know. Yeah, it's terrible. I've always judged you for it. It's good you've really pulled your socks up now. All right. Don't be one of those people. All right. When they say, you know, you really got me thinking, I've really been thinking since last time, you just stay cool. You can say, really interesting, you know, I really think you could be onto something here. Because the whole point of these questions is you want to empower them. All right. There are plenty of people who stop smoking or quit smoking, and they spend the rest of their life fighting urges, cravings, feeling regretful, feeling resentful, and just frustrated, and it's just an annoyance. And they annoy other people just telling them their story of how they're struggling. And usually they keep starting and stopping. All right. What we want to do, and what I love doing in my work, is empowering people to make a change and feel so good inside that it can't help but bleed over into all the other areas of their life where they improve their life and they feel so much better inside. They feel so much happier. They feel more joy. They feel more love. They feel happier and just more inspired inside. And that's exactly what you can do. When you are that person for somebody, whether it's stopping smoking or something else, when you are kind, when you are curious, when you're interested, and you do that consistently over a period of time, you build up trust. And now you're a mirror for that other person. And remember, the key thing you want to mirror for them is this attitude of fascination and curiosity. Why? Because then they will adopt that as their way about thinking about the habit, instead of their predominant mode, which is how difficult it's going to be, recrimination, guilt, worry, all the anxiety of how they're going to manage this transformation. They're going to be doing it from this point of fascination and curiosity. All right. And so to do that, okay, you've got to allow it to be okay for it to take as long as it takes, over multiple conversations if necessary. When you ask a question, you'll be sitting back and listening and ratifying. You'll ask one question at a time, then be quiet. You'll be consistently modeling this kindness and compassion through the quality of the attention that you give them and the fact you're ratifying what they're saying. And you'll pay attention to these signs when they're on track, when you can see that person's on track, because they'll be telling you. So I really hope that you've enjoyed this video today. Please hit me up. Please share this with other people, because I really want, one of the things I love is for people to change and transform. I was amazed, and I still am to this day, but I remember being amazed at how many people, when I started 2.5 decades ago, helped people to quit smoking, amongst other things. The confidence that people felt. It wasn't just the more energy. It wasn't just saving money. It wasn't just their health. It wasn't just their energy, all this stuff. It was how confident they felt, and that confidence they brought to other areas of their life. So I know that change is possible. It's totally possible to quit smoking, and it's possible to do it without urges, without it being a struggle, and for it to be a really strong symbol of how a person can change and become more empowered. And you can help a person get to that point. You can play the formative, pivotal role in getting them in the slipstream, so that they're just inevitable. It's like the current of the sea that's going to eventually take them to the island of transformation and their change, where they become a non-smoker. But it only happens when you understand that there's a process to this, that you mustn't trigger antagonism and defense mechanisms. There must be no judgment, and you take your time to ask these questions. You know, do you mind if I ask you how you got started smoking? Why do you smoke now? How long have you smoked? And do you ever wish that quitting was easy? Because when you get to that point of asking, if I knew somebody who could guarantee you'd quit just like you described, if you're willing to talk to them for 15 minutes just to find out what they know. So thank you for listening. Please feel free to subscribe. Please share this with your friends, colleagues, neighbours, family, anyone who has somebody maybe who wants to help someone else to quit smoking. It may even be of interest to smokers who you know. But please there will be other people who you know who really want to help other people out. This information is really, it's really like gold dust. This is what will help actually them to be able to help other people. So thank you so much for your time. I'm Richard Haggerty. I'm a smoking cessation expert. Thank you very much for taking time to listen. I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions or follow-up, please ask me in the comments. Let me know. I will happily do some follow-up on this, happy to do some follow-up videos. Please just let me know that this is how this is helping you, and I look forward to seeing you down the road.